Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Cunningham, and this is my oral review for systematic review. So the title of the paper I'm going over in this presentation is The Efficacy of Using Probiotics with Antagonistic Activity Against Pathogens of Wound Infection, an Interrogative Review of Literature. This is a systematic review, by definition given in Go, which is a review of existing research using explicit, accountable, rigorous research methods. So I'm going to go through the abstract real quick. I'm going to go through everything in more detail later. So quick background, there is an observed link between microbiota and infection rates. They're both bacteria. There will be a link between the two. So the objective is to see how the infection rates and wound healing are affected by the use of microbiota. The data sources used in this paper are PubMed, ScienceDirect, Web of Science, and Scopus. The study eligibility criteria is not given in the abstract. However, it mostly just has to do with probiotic and wound infection papers that are focused on probiotic and wound infection. Participants are 39 studies that all have to do with probiotics and wound infections. The interventions used are typically probiotic versus control of some kind. There are many different types of studies. It's quite a heterogeneous data set. The methods are including and extracting data from papers revolving around infection and wound healing, and the results show that there is a link between infection and wound healing. So the conclusion is oral probiotics and topical probiotics reduce the rate of infection in wound infection specifically. So limitations, as I kind of went over, are mostly that the data is very heterogeneous. So there's a lot of different types of study included, which we'll get into later. So a quick introduction. The rationale is there is a link between oral and topical probiotic usage and the rate of wound infection. So the objective of this paper is to look at that link and determine to what degree, if at all, probiotic use affects wound infection. So the methods of this paper, quick drink of water. The protocol is just looking at the data sources, again, PubMed, ScienceDirect, Web of Science, and Scopus, to get a broad number of studies, and then the eligibility criteria of those studies and the exclusion criteria of those studies, then narrows down the topic, and then the data is aggregated. So eligibility criteria are full text that use oral and topical probiotics, and exclusion criteria are things that have to do with healing without wound infection. So it has to be a study about probiotics and infection. Those are the two required topics. So we went over the information sources, but the data collection process is they found their 39 studies and then sorted those into 3 categories and then extracted the data from there. So the categories are in vitro, animal, and human trials. The selection topic was not given explicitly, so this has to do with some inference. To give a quick PICOS of this is populations dealing with infections. The intervention is the use of probiotics. The comparison is the control versus use. The outcome found in this paper is there is a link between the use of probiotics and the rate of infection. It is an antagonistic relationship. And the type of paper, as said before, is a systematic review. So the risk of bias in this paper, I believe, comes from just how heterogeneous the data is. there is a lot of room for interpretation of data, and the way the data is used could lead to confirmation bias. Is the biggest type of bias that this study is weak to, and to my knowledge in this paper was not controlled for. The summary measures is the principal measures, and that's not explicitly given that I could find, but does show a relationship between probiotic use and wound infection. Quick synthesis of results is just that. There is a relationship between the types and use of probiotic bacteria in the rate of infection in patients. The risk of bias across studies was also not controlled for that I could tell, because they were extracting their data directly. There is potential for many types of bias, but again, the most likely one that I could see is confirmation bias. The additional analysis seems to come from the papers looking at the types of probiotic, not just probiotics in general, but the different types of bacteria that were used and their specific effects. So the results of this paper, of 331 papers, 39 were the only ones that were found to be relevant for this paper. So the study characteristics, this paper has to do with, as said before, just probiotic usage. The risk of bias within the studies, again, there is some. There is some questioned control within specifically the in vitro studies, but I could not find control outside of that. So the results of individual studies are given on various tables, which is just too many tables to give here, and it's probably not in good faith to use someone else's study like that. So the results are shown best on those tables. Synthesis of results, there is a link shown by most of the studies, not all of the studies, on the use of probiotics and the rate of wound infection. There is a risk across some of the studies. So again, the synthesis of this data did not seem to have a control for bias, so it is still weak to that. And as said before, the additional analysis seems to come from the types of bacteria used. The discussion section of this paper, again, real quick, is the and the summary of evidence is that most studies show a link, not all of the studies, and the degree to that link is varied. The limitations of this, as said before, there is quite a bit of variance in the data, so there is a potential problem there, or potential weakness there in the conclusions. But the conclusion that the paper draws is that there is need for further information, but there is some agreement among data that there is a link between probiotic use and wound infection rates. And this is funded by the Faculty of Health Sciences. And here's my quick reference section. Thank you very much. I hope you have a nice day. How do I stop recording? That's how.